This is the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting. It is Wednesday, April 24th at 3 p.m. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Delgado.
Here.
Fasella.
Present.
Friedman.
Here.
Gannett.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Tanner Harold. Ula.
Here.
And Barnes.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. This is the Decennial Committee on Local Government Efficiency meeting, and we need a motion to approve the agenda as distributed. Do I hear
So moved.
motion? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board? Of the committee. Hearing none, we're going to be moving on to the next agenda item. Is there a motion to approve the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Decennial Committee meeting minutes from March 27th, 2024?
So moved.
It's been moved?
Second.
And seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have the final presentation by Illinois Business Consulting. Ladies and gentlemen.
Hi, thank you so much for having us today. We are really excited to be back for our final presentation. I'll go ahead and just get started. So we'll do a team introduction really quickly. My name is Richa. I'm the project manager for this project, and I'm a finance and data science major.
Hello everyone, good to be here. My name is Will Shoesmith and I am the senior manager on the project, and I'm a finance and information systems major.
Hello everyone, my name is Kushi. I'm an economics major and I'm a senior consultant on this project.
Hello, my name is Ben. I'm studying economics and I'm also a senior consultant on this project.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael Rivera. I'm a finance major.
Hello everyone, my name is Amrud, and I'm a Finance and Information Systems major.
Hi everyone, my name is Rakshita Kunde, and I'm a Finance and Data Science major.
Hi everyone, I'm Xin Huang, and I'm a Chemical Engineering major.
Hi everyone, I'm Sia Shekhar, and I'm an Industrial Engineering major.
Hi everyone, my name is Pragat. I'm a CS Econ major.
Next slide, please. So now that we've introduced the team, I'll really quickly go over the agenda for our presentation. So we'll move forward with the executive summary and methodology, and then we'll talk a little about the research we did with MTD's background and their current state. We'll also talk over some identified efficiencies and inefficiencies for MTD, look over their current improvement strategies for the inefficiencies, and then also talk a little bit about the peer company governmental analysis and comparison, and then we'll move forward with our final recommendations. Next slide, please. So our next section is the executive summary and methodology section. This is just a breakdown of the project and an overview of the information that we'll cover throughout this presentation. So the executive summary is just through analyzing MTD's background, programs, and different agreements. MTD is clearly an important asset to the local areas of Champaign-Urbana and Savoy. And on a more technical note, MTD is also demonstrating their importance to the community and economic impact through increasing ridership and positive bus utilization. However, there are a few areas in which MTD can improve to continue to excel in terms of their operational efficiency. So the key areas of focus that we focused on were economic impact, staffing, and software. So economic impact was identified as one of the efficiencies for MTD, and it was identified through increasing ridership and through the intergovernmental agreements, which suggested demand from the community, and also an optimal bus utilization, which supports the increasing capacity from furthering the community impact. And then the two main inefficiencies that were identified for MTD were staffing and software. So a little bit about staffing. The absenteeism rate was above the national average and benchmark, which suggested a room for improvement. And then the staffing was also identified as a key concern for public transit industry as a whole post-COVID-19. And then in terms of software, it's also noted as an industry inefficiency, and the lack of current software can just decrease efficiency in all aspects. So I'll quickly brush over some improvement strategies for staffing. So active recruitment, expanding employee pool, incentivizing employees, and continuing the mentorship program are just some general improvement strategies that were already implemented by MTD and used by some of the peer companies. And then moving to the improvement strategies for software, which is just centralizing software, utilizing economic impact software, and project financing were also some strategies that were already being implemented by MTD and have been suggested by peer companies. Are there any questions on this slide? Okay, awesome. I'll pass it off to Ben. Can we move to the next slide, please?
So I will be talking about our methodology to break down our task and how we ultimately did it. So first, we had to understand who MTD was, and obviously they're a public transit company and a governmental unit. So our task was to help MTD with their operational efficiency assessments by the Decennial Committees on Local Government Efficiency Act. So what we did was we broke this project into 6 steps into 3 categories. So starting with the gray, we had preliminary research and internal interviews. This is where we got background on MTD, the industry, and understood some key KPIs that we should be analyzing. Next, we moving on to the blue. This is where we gathered all of our insights that would help us with this final report. So we conducted research on these intergovernmental agreements that MTD has. We compared the KPIs to the benchmarks of the industry and other peer companies to understand where MTD is efficient and where potential inefficiencies may lie. Then we conducted external interviews to gain more insight into peer companies and how they are adapting to this changing industry. And finally, in the orange, we have our final recommendations that you'll see later at the end of this presentation. Are there any questions on this slide? Great, I'll be passing back to Risha.
Thank you, Ben. So we'll move on to MTD's background and current state. So this was just understanding MTD's background, the programs and agreements, to just understand what MTD's current state is and what their current community impact is as well. With that, I'll pass it off to Pragath.
Okay, so looking at a quick overview of MTD, turning to MTD's background section. So MTD offers a variety of different packages for seniors, veterans, and students, showcasing their inclusivity, and they also support environmental sustainability. Now, looking at the left, looking at MTD's goals, so their first goal was to improve employee retention because of current problems with understaffing, and they also hope to transition to a larger fleet of hydrogen buses. Now, the goal to improve bus cycle times from 15 minutes to 10 minutes is an operational target to improve the user experience and reduce wait times. Now, finally, MTD hopes to implement advanced software systems to make more data-driven decisions. Now, looking at the right, looking at MTD services. So MTD offers a bus system that many students use. They also have nightly safety initiatives, which include safe rides and safe walks. Now, they also offer a variety of other services like C-carts, paratransit, the Dash and Veterans Pass, showcasing their inclusivity and dedication to accessibility. And finally, they have the Illinois Terminal, which is a central hub. Now I'd like to pass it off to Michael to discuss MTD's agreements with the community.
Hey everyone, so another important part of this project was looking into the intergovernmental agreements. So on this slide we'll be covering the Champaign-Urbana and the Village of Savoy specifically. So starting off, or just a quick note, the dark blue boxes is just providing an insight of what the intergovernmental agreement is providing transit to. So that is Champaign-Urbana, County of Champaign, University of Illinois, and Village of Savoy. But I'll really be focusing on the lighter blue. That's the more economic impact. So first, looking at the Champaign-Urbana, this is really heavy on annexation due to the fact that being able to provide more routes to this area will provide more accessibility to the city while increasing ridership for MTD. Next is the County of Champaign. This is really focusing on those rural areas that transportation may not be too accessible. So providing more of a cost-effective, safe and reliable rides for the County of Champaign will help accessibility around town and getting place to place, whether that's work or to the store or wherever, making it just really more accessible and also increasing ridership for MTD. Next is the University of Illinois. This is providing transit for the students and faculty around the campus through fixed routes and through the special routes that MTD provides. And this is really benefiting the people, the students and faculty, to engage with local businesses and possibly even bring more students to the University of Illinois by seeing how easily accessible it is. And this is really increasing ridership for MTD because more students are being able to utilize those transportation needs that are needed. And lastly is the Village Savoy. This was heavily on annexation, so being able to provide more routes for the Village Savoy will help increase more accessibility around town and just to whatever needs. And for MTD, this will help increase ridership, as I mentioned earlier, and be able to just acquire more routes throughout the Village Savoy. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, I'll pass. Oh,
yeah, I'm glad to see you have a rectangle or whatever you call it for Savoy, because that is a real area that I've heard individuals comment on. So that's good. Thank you.
There's no further questions. I'll pass it on to Ruchia.
Thank you, Michael. So in addition to the four different intergovernmental agreements that Michael discussed, there are also four more that we want to discuss that are more about niche parts of the community. So the first being the Developmental Services Center Agreement, which essentially goes to more mobility limited individuals, and it helps to provide transportation for those disabled individuals to serve all members of the community and emphasizing inclusivity once again. In addition, we also have DRES as an intergovernmental agreement, which more focuses on the University of Illinois and the disabled and mobility limited individuals within the university. So it's impactful to the University of Illinois community because we do have a large disability body of different students, staff, and faculty, which help to benefit through these accessible transportation options that they might not be able to get if they went to another university or through a different company. Going to the third intergovernmental agreement, we are looking at Champaign-Urbana and the Urbana District number 116, which helps to provide the MTD services to 5 schools in Champaign and 7 neighborhoods in the Urbana area. So this really helps to economically impact various different students from these 2 districts because it provides safe and reliable transportation, as well as resources and supervision for the different students who are utilizing this service, as well as different safety procedures that they can follow, like bus evacuations that occur every single year. Lastly, when looking at the Maintenance and Repair Intergovernmental Agreement, this is once again through the University of Illinois and is done with the DRES agreement. Something that I want to highlight is that the Maintenance Agreement, although it is an intergovernmental agreement on the side, it also does fall under the maintenance agreements, which is a separate type of document. And this is really economically impacting a variety of people because MTD is providing bus maintenance, which is economically impacting different sorts of organizations, as well as ensuring that the buses are being utilized to the best capacity, and that all of the students and all of the faculty and members of the community who are utilizing the MTD bus system can have a safe and reliable transportation that they know will come to them. Are there any questions on the slide?
Not a question, but just a clarification. Looking at that slide, I noticed, sorry, I didn't notice it earlier. Under the DSC box, if we can go back to that tech services, where it says DSC pays MTD 1/12 back monthly. That's not exactly what's occurring. We have an agreement. In fact, we'll be bringing it to the board soon. We do this annually. We pay them an annual amount for providing the service. They pay us an annual amount for fares, for access for their population. And so there is a little bit of we pay them and they pay us, but it's not the same amount broken up. We pay them the full amount for the cost of the service, and then we just have an agreed amount that we pay, that they pay us for fare compensation, and that is paid back monthly for 1/12 of that amount. So just as a clarification on that point.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this slide at all? If not, then I'll pass it over to Richa. If you can move it to the next slide, please.
Thank you. So now that we've kind of covered the intergovernmental agreements and different programs that MTD offers, we'll look into the identified efficiencies and inefficiencies through both qualitative and quantitative data points. With that, I'll pass it off to Amrit.
Thank you, Richa. So as you mentioned, through our research, we looked at both inefficiencies as well as efficiencies. And looking into the efficiency sides, we were able to pinpoint 5 areas that we believe MTD is excelling in or has shown growth in to meet certain benchmarks. Starting on the bottom left, we start with maintenance. And a lot of this information we were able to pull from interviews with the maintenance department. And some things that we would find are there's new night supervisors to give directions for late night shifts when, you know, it's a little bit more of a risky route and there's more guidance needed. There's also been an increase in the number of lifts within the maintenance department from 4 to 9, which yields faster maintenance times and can get buses back on the routes much faster. And then finally, with tracking sheets for tasks and end of shift forms, this is just helping to increase fluidity within the internal processes of the maintenance department, just in terms of data tracking and records. Moving into sustainability, a lot of our research found ISO 14001, and then the 100% renewable energy sources for the buses as some environmentally sustainable metrics that we believe MTD has been following, as well as federal and state grants that are being utilized in place by the Zero Emissions Transition Plan and the Climate Action Plan. Moving into communications, we decided to break this up into both internal and external. Internal kind of addressing how the headquarters is communicating with the buses on the routes to ensure more efficiency in day-to-day operations. This is through the employee intranet, as well as two-way radios that can be utilized by both maintenance faculties and the bus operators. Moving to externals, this is shown to have a help desk that can be used to track goals and see where MTD is meeting those goals, as well as communication that's being relayed to drivers and riders on a very frequent basis to keep them up to date. Moving into the blue section, this is where we chose to focus on the aspects of efficiencies that we did calculations for. We were able to provide some quantitative data and come up with some of these figures using the numbers that MTD provided us. Starting with bus utilization, this is just what percentage of the total fleet is being utilized on routes in day-to-day operations. For MTD, we have seen an increase from 74.6%, to 84.7% in the fall. That has been projections that we have received from MTD employees, as well as spare ratio, which is we're tracking to drop from 25.4% to 15.3%. Our secondary research has shown us that the industry benchmark is around 20%, so MTD is very clearly on track to meet that threshold by the fall semester. And finally, with ridership, this is looking at what growth rates we have seen with ridership since COVID. Looking at 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023, and then the projected value for 2023 to 2024. Every year we have seen growth within ridership as it's kind of become a little bit more standard. Obviously seeing that big initial growth with the 55.4% in 2021, 2022. Our primary takeaway with that is with all of these, in fact, is MTD has been successfully optimizing management procedures and has shown steady growth in terms of ridership and bus utilization. Are there any questions about this slide? Go ahead.
Yeah, so you mentioned you can put the slide back up. You mentioned the industry standards that we're going to be hitting by fall 2024. What's the industry standard for utilization radio, and what industry are you looking at?
So within utilization, we found just in terms of other companies that are doing the same thing, mass transit, we were seeing about that 85 to 90% utilization during peak time. But what we chose to focus on for MTD was kind of finding that balance between spare ratio and utilization, where if we were to bring spare ratio down around 10%, we would see a growth in bus utilization conversely.
I'll also interject really quickly. So in terms of industry standards, currently right now, post-COVID numbers for most public transit companies in the industry are around 75%, like recovery in terms of their utilization of buses and their ridership level. So that's also kind of what we base it off of. I don't think it's an established industry benchmark, but we're kind of basing it off of what we have noticed through peer company interviews as well.
Are there any other questions on this slide? If not, I can pass it to Shane.
Thank you. So now I'll be talking more about the staffing and software inefficiencies that have been identified as some areas of improvement for MTD. Starting with staffing, we've noticed that we found that there was an increase in call-offs and higher turnover rate for first years after bus operators are done with training. And this leads to an insufficient number of bus operators that can utilize a full fleet of buses that MTD has. This is just mainly seen through an increase in absenteeism rate and turnover rate, which is further shown through the visualizations down below. So to start with the first graph, it's the employee turnover rate. And the main takeaway from this graph is if you sum up all the quarterly turnover rates, you can find that the annual turnover rate has been steadily increasing from 2019 to 2022, with the highest being, the all-time high being in 2022. Now moving on to the table down below, it's the absenteeism rate that we've found and or the MTD has provided us, and we just averaged, and we've broken down into 3 categories: pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID. And the biggest takeaway is that post-COVID averages for both operators and non-operators has more than doubled, which is a huge substantial increase. Now moving on to software, through internal interviews with MTD employees, it's been identified that there's just a lack of adequate technology and software for specifically analyzing financial KPIs, but also throughout all departments, it's been just, software has been an area of inefficiency that they've just brought up. And this could be due to a lot of the recording and evaluation have not been updated at MTD since the 80s. And this older software lacks features which can slow down work and not allow for automation and efficiency that could be done through newer softwares. And so now we can talk about some key insights. To start with staffing, this issue with staffing affects the amount of service MTD can provide to the community. So even if there is enough demand in the community, Champaign-Urbana community, for public transportation, if MTD can't get the buses out because there's a lack of bus operators, and that would affect the ridership levels, which also speaks to the second insight, which is that this will also affect utilization rate and spare ratio that we just talked about earlier, because the MTD has enough buses, but if they just can't get them out on the road, then it would bump up the spare ratio and decrease utilization rate past the benchmarks. Now moving on to some software insights. There's more outdated technology makes it more difficult to gather and store key data and analysis. So in regards to maintenance, that could be the maintenance department using software to track maintenance or KPIs and when buses should come in, and then or HR just with scheduling and other KPIs that can be measured and analyzed. And also this lack of updated software makes it more difficult to collect information for MTD compared to newer softwares that can allow for more automation and efficiency. Are there any questions or concerns on this slide?
So the table down there, what does that represent?
The table on this slide, at the bottom left, what does that represent?
It's the absenteeism rate of how many call-offs there have been for MTD, and it's been broken down into operators and non-operators.
Thank you.
Post-COVID, is this the new norm with all industries, all types of businesses, that absenteeism is up? I mean, are we unique, or is this a common thread through a lot of different industries?
From a lot of the peer companies that we've interviewed, absenteeism has been it's been like an industry thing where there's been increase in call-offs. Specifically, I think with MTD through interviews, it's been found that January there's been a new act that's passed that allows call-offs to be easier, or just a new act that passed through Illinois, and that could be a reason for the increase in absenteeism rate as well.
Since you mentioned the paid time off, did you see a big difference after January in Illinois-based peer companies versus out-of-state, and how generally are we stacking up on absenteeism compared to out-of-state or in-state peer companies? And then I guess the follow-up to that would be, I don't know if any of our peer companies came up with any solutions, or are you guys bringing solutions on a later slide? Don't let me jump ahead.
Solutions will be in the later slide. What you mentioned with out-of-state and in-state, I don't think that was.
Yeah, I can go ahead and take this question too. We weren't able to get specific numbers from all the peer companies, so we don't have the exact numbers, but a lot of the peer company interviewees did state that absenteeism was an issue that they were facing, or staffing was an issue that they were facing. So we were able to kind of come up with the conclusion that it could be an industry issue post-COVID-19 due to multiple peer companies having it, but we weren't able to get the quantitative data for that.
I'll add on to that, both Alan and Phil, that they interviewed a specific subset of peer agencies, and they're telling you that all of those peer agencies are struggling with this exact same issue. I can tell you on top of that, although I can't show you a chart, I can tell you that when we participate in events and conferences and seminars with our national association. So we have thousands of participants from all across the country and Canada that we all are experiencing the same thing. It is something that the association is targeting and trying to address nationwide. So the short answer is yes, this is something that everybody is struggling with. Phil, you asked about solutions. They have some recommendations that they'll talk about, but industry-wide, we're all dealing with it. And on the whole, we're getting on top of. You've heard me report that we are back to full employment, but because of this chart, we are seeing that we need to overemploy what we're budgeting, because we're seeing this trend nationwide, and certainly here locally, that we just have more absenteeism than we ever had before.
Are there any other questions or concerns on this slide? If not, I can pass it back to Risha.
Thank you. So now that we've kind of identified some of the inefficiencies and efficiencies for MTD, we'll talk a little bit about what MTD has currently started to implement in order to combat some of the inefficiencies. So with that, I'll pass it off to Sia.
Thank you, Richa. So we kind of broke it down into two main kind of areas for the categories. First, focusing on staffing strategies the MTD is currently utilizing. So essentially, this mainly revolves around a mentorship program where more seasoned drivers work with newer drivers to help them deal with any more unexpected challenges. Through internal interviews, we found that a lot of the retention issues that MTD faced were due to the fact that new drivers encountered situations they weren't very prepared for in training. So having that more one-on-one mentorship really allows for retention to improve, and we have seen that quantitatively by an increase of 45% in first-year retention. So this really shows that it's an effective solution that MTD should continue to focus on. And the long-term effect is that it will hopefully promote a tight-knit community within MTD that really fosters connections between operators. Then moving on to the gray area for software strategies that MTD is currently utilizing is a vehicle performance tracking software. Sorry, I think I updated this slide, but it did not update, but we looked further into it. It's actually not a pilot period. It is a software kind of management tool called New Flyer Connect that MTD is using that really allows for very proactive maintenance attention for buses, so giving that quicker turnaround period if there are any issues, and that will also help with maintaining a consistent utilization rate. So they're kind of known as telematic features that allow for remote data and alerts to be conveyed to MTD staff. So moving on to kind of the key insights and takeaways from these current strategies, we see that mentees are receiving really effective guidance and advice to accelerate learning. Mentors are really building some communication and leadership skills for further movement in roles possibly further on in MTD. And the telematics data really allows for streamlined maintenance processes that enhances reliability, which is a very important aspect of MTD's goals. And this will all allow for a very sustainable and effective transit future for the firm. If there's no questions on the slide, then I can pass it off, but yes, go ahead.
This one, okay. You mentioned your mentorship program or something that is that the most effective method that you saw or found, or could you mention any others that you maybe looked into? and their ability to enhance staffing? Because you talked about earlier incentivizing staff, so you have to get the staff before you can employ them and to become mentors. Did you have any other strategies that you might suggest?
I'm not. Yeah, I can take this. So we have some identified strategies towards the end of the slide. This is just one of the strategies that MTD is currently doing. Sorry about that. So yeah, this is just one of the strategies that MTD is currently doing that we identified through internal interviews, but there are other ones that we've identified both through peer companies and through the MTD team as well that we'll talk about in future slides.
If there are no other comments, I can pass it back to Richa. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So now that we've kind of covered some of MTD's current strategies for combating their inefficiencies, we'll talk a little bit about the peer company governmental efficiency analysis and comparison that we did, which was just researching different governmental efficiencies of peer companies to understand industry issues and methods of combating those issues better. So with that, I'll pass it off to Kushi.
Thank you, Richa. So as you can see here, this slide overviews all of the 6 peer companies that we interviewed. These are just a collection of facts about the operational efficiencies identified in each of these peer companies and strategies that these companies are implementing to improve their own operational efficiencies. Just for some context, MTD is already doing really well in a lot of these operational aspects and is either a pioneer in or is doing better than a lot of these companies in all of these efficiency aspects. So I'll just quickly outline what these boxes talk about with regards to what other companies have done. So starting off with Campus, Iowa, they employ students as operators and administrators, which points to lower absenteeism rates. Then CADA, Pennsylvania, they have a high ridership concentration because of the way in which their routes are structured, as well as the regular patterns in routes. And then COTA effectively uses their data tracking technology, and they're petitioning to increase the sales tax to support Linkus, which is like a program in Columbus. And then Lane Transit District gets a lot of their revenue from payroll tax, so that is effectively being utilized to increase service efficiency. City Bus of Lafayette is using residential contracts to increase their ridership, and Metro Transit Madison is effectively using federal grants towards productive projects like the bus on rails. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, I'll pass it to...
So these peer companies which were selected, I guess those were in consultation with MTD?
Yes. Are there any other questions?
I will say, Sharif, we had a much longer list but I think these were the 6 that responded to the consultants, and so they were able to get information.
So did we try to reach Bloomington, Indiana University? Bloomington, Indiana?
Yeah, we did reach out to Bloomington Transit from Indiana University, but we didn't really get an active response.
Okay.
Any other questions? If not, I'll pass it off to Rakshita.
Thank you. So when looking at the different 6 peer companies, we also identified staffing, software, and ridership as the 3 main industry inefficiencies through these interviews. So when looking on the left-hand side of the slide, we're going to look at more at staffing and software. So the observed inefficiency of staffing was that there was a low employee retention rate, and that the issue of obtaining bus operators is not only just an MTD issue, but also an industry issue. And this is because of the inability to sustain workers for many different years, and that's something that not only, once again, MTD is facing, but also different other peer transit companies. And then when looking at the software inefficiency, software is an inefficiency for many peer companies, as they have similar inefficiencies of inefficient systems and software that are limiting the amount of data analysis that they can do with their numerical summaries and different financial KPIs. So they're currently using a little more older systems, which is limiting their innovation and their ability to once again do more in-depth analysis. So when looking at the key takeaways for staffing and software, for staffing, the that there was peer strategies that were mentioned were utilizing and implementing various types of benefits based on qualities like workships or seniority to incentivize the staff to stay with the company for a longer period of time, increasing that employee retention rate. And then another key takeaway for software was being able to update their systems and further analyze KPIs and have a more organized and effective technological system to be able to analyze different numerical summaries that they haven't been once before. Now, when looking to the right-hand side of the slide, we're going to look at the ridership inefficiency. The table that we kind of created and visualized on this slide represents the ridership levels from 2019 pre-COVID and then 2023 post-COVID. So through this graph and through our different peer transit company interviews, we created 4 different ridership level insights. So first, ridership is an industry inefficiency being faced after the effect of COVID, which once again is reflected above, as all 6 interview companies that we talked to haven't been able to recover their pre-COVID levels and only have been able to recover 80% of all their pre-pandemic ridership levels. In addition to that, although we identified this as an industry inefficiency, we also want to highlight that it's a strength for MTD, as MTD does have strong ridership, with their levels increasing slowly to reach their pre-COVID levels from the 11 million that they once had before to the 8 million that they currently had in 2023, and they're trying to continue to increase in 2024. Lastly, there were many peer strategies that our peer interview companies highlighted, like utilizing 60-foot buses and also leveraging their intergovernmental agreements in different capacities to be able to increase these ridership levels. Are there any questions on this slide at all? If not, then I'll pass it over to Richa.
Thank you. So now we'll get into our final recommendation section, which is just a compilation of MTD's current strategies as well as strategies that we've identified through relevant primary and secondary research. So with that, I'll pass it off to Kushi.
Yep. Thank you, Richa. So this is the much-awaited recommendation slide for staffing inefficiencies identified within MTD. So the boxes that are highlighted in orange are the ones that MTD is already implementing. So that is really excellent towards increasing efficiency. And the one in blue is something that we believe can help MTD further increase their or improve their staffing inefficiency. So the slide is structured in a way that the title represents the recommendation. The middle box tells you about a step-by-step implementation process. The box below that is about the importance of this recommendation, and the final highlighted boxes below kind of lend credibility to this recommendation in terms of whether it has been implemented by other companies. So starting off with active recruitment strategies, we believe that if MTD increases their job ad postings on websites such as LinkedIn or continues participating in networking events and career fairs, they can gain access to a larger pool of potential employees. And this is a very reliable method to increase recruitment and is being actively done by all of the 6 peer companies that we interviewed. Moving on to incentivizing employees in terms of both monetary and non-monetary benefits, such as bonuses, overtime pay, as well as family, health, and education benefits. MTD is already doing this. And another aspect that they've incorporated in this is seniority. That is, the incentives increase as employees become senior. And this is helpful in retaining employees for the longer term, which has proven to be beneficial. We also think that rostering practices should be reevaluated and that incentive pay should be implemented, because this is something that is popularly being done throughout the industry. Finally, improving training and mentorship strategies. This has been touched on earlier. So specifically, MTD has cut down the non-operator training time, which has proven to be beneficial. We also think that implementing online exams at the end of the learning modules for operators will help them retain the theoretical knowledge better. And then in terms of their mentorship program, it just needs to be developed a little bit more than it already is, just so that, you know, seasoned employees can establish good connections with the junior ones, and this can help reduce post-graduation turnover rate. And all of these insights have been obtained from interviews with MTD's employees. So these are the recommendations. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, I'll pass it off to Ben.
So this slide will be addressing specific software inefficiencies that Xing was talking about earlier in this presentation. So similar to like the last slide, we have the orange boxes saying what MTD is currently doing to improve this, as well as this orange box is the most feasible and most impactful out of these 3 recommendations for software. So starting with the orange box, utilizing Microsoft Excel to centralize all KPIs within MTD so they're able to be tracked. MTD is currently doing this for important KPIs, but we believe that using Microsoft Excel to track KPIs that you wouldn't necessarily think are that important would be beneficial for further analysis. Next would be implementing a data collection software. So by doing this, MTD is able to track financials, inventory, supply chain, ridership, and more. This will give a dashboard to MTD so they can track this on the daily. And making use of third-party services would make this process a lot smoother and easier, and they can help with implementation. Next, moving off to the middle box, we have the economic impact software. So as you can see through our presentation, the economic impact that MTD has on the community and individuals in the surrounding area is very crucial for this analysis. So for any analysis that requires this in the future, the addition of a software such as InPlan would be able to calculate the economic impact with more qualitative data and with more accuracy. Outsourcing this implementation and use of this software is also recommended to make sure that it's exhaustive and thorough. Finally, would be project financing. So the ability to spend money on these projects will be done by utilizing and leveraging grant money. So applying for specific software grants would allow MTD the wiggle room to pay for these projects, as well as utilizing other grants that maybe wouldn't necessarily be directly for software. They can work these projects in as well. Are there any questions for this slide? Great, I'll be passing on to Richa.
Thank you. So that concludes our presentation. We have an appendix at the end for reference, which is just all of our past slides, but are there any final questions? If not, thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
I just throw this out there. You gave us a good summary of what our intergovernmental agreements are, which that was good, and I'm glad they're working. Did you have any recommendations for how those ought to be changed or anything like that?
We didn't do a in-depth analysis of the intergovernmental agreements. We more so just kind of read over them, summarized them, and provided how they kind of impact the economy. So I don't think there's anything that we noticed in particular, but we did go in more detail about their economic impact in the written report that we're still working with MTD to have by the end of the semester.
I just want to compliment your group. It was a very thorough presentation. I'm just curious to know, do you do more private consultations on these kinds of things, or is this the public part of our economy? Is that something new to most of you?
I can speak on this one. So in my time in IBC, I've been on a wide variety of projects, from small additive manufacturing labs all the way to Fortune 500 companies. So we do both public and private sector projects. I wouldn't say we necessarily have a specialty in one or the other, just kind of whatever comes up and what the client needs.
Congratulations, it's very well done.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our presentation.
Great job.
Thank you very much to all of you. Go ahead, George.
I've been fascinated to follow your description of what's on the slides. Unfortunately, my old eyes can't read them. Could we get printouts of those slides, paper printouts?
We can provide those for you, George, yes.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was asking that question of the group or of you, Carl.
Yeah, we can get them.
I think I could have a better appreciation.
And as Risha just mentioned, there also will be an actual report. This is just a presentation, but there will be a report too, and we'll get that in hard copy for you as well.
Good, thank you.
If you are going to do a report, I would be really interested. We just recently implemented this system. So seniority is kind of a thing with MTD, and it affects everything, probably, as you guys kind of went over, from being able to pick shifts, time off, all kinds of things, as well as pay. So we recently implemented a system that would give new hires and existing employees credit for seniority for related fields that they worked in before they were employed with MTD. So that way, if we poach, you know, a driver for FedEx or Peoria Charter and get him or her to come over to MTD, she or he would have, you know, some level of seniority coming in, wouldn't necessarily be working the graveyard shift. And I'd really be curious both how that's affected our ability to recruit, but also how it could affect retention. So, you know, if you're a guy who has seniority because you've been here for 10 years and somebody comes in and might be able to jump a little bit ahead of you, has that hurt retention at all since we've implemented it, and how much has it helped hiring? I'd be curious to see how that stacks up.
Yeah, we didn't do any research on that specifically, but we can definitely, we're still working on the written report and talking with the MTD team, so we can definitely talk with them more and implement that in the written report. But we haven't done an analysis of that in particular.
I think this would be a great opportunity for Jacinda to run up here real quick and give you a more in-depth reply, because we are seeing effective results from these initiatives.
You got to let the kids do some work here, Carl. Come on.
Yeah, well, I don't disagree, but that wasn't something that we specifically asked them to look at. But I'm sure all through the retention and recruitment portion, Jacinda probably wanted to say something anyway, so I thought I'd give her an opportunity.
Thanks. This is Jacinda Cromer, HR Director. And just in response to your most recent question, a bit of clarification that we do give experience credit for employees coming with previous related experience, up to 2 years credit. It doesn't move them higher on the seniority. It moves them higher on the wage scale, so they get a better wage coming in, but they will still end up working that graveyard shift if they go to full-time, so they don't get a higher spot above other people. That seniority spot is based on just your hire date, and so we didn't implement that other piece. It has helped with recruiting. There are lots of people who get 1 to 2 years of experience coming in, so they get a higher rate of pay, and we have certainly seen an increase with interest and people applying because of that. Lots of people sign up for the experience credit and get credit. I don't have hard data about how that has affected our recruitment efforts, but I certainly could start looking into it.
So a follow-up question. So as you mentioned, the highest amount of experience which could be counted, that's 2 years?
That is correct, 2 years. But at the same time that we did that, we also shortened our wage progression. So there's only essentially kind of 6 steps to move up to the top rate. And so it's quicker to move to the top rate. And then when people already come in 2 years, it really becomes a quite short progression for people to reach the top rate.
So this 2-year, the highest cap, is it based on some standard practice within the transit community, or why is that? So for example, someone drives a bus in Connect Transit in Bloomington, and he or she has 5 years of experience, and suddenly he or she decides to come to Champaign and work for MTD. So shouldn't we count that 5 years of experience?
We do count that 5 years of experience, but they only get a maximum of 2 years. And so we do have a procedure for that. Employees complete a form and send it back to their prior employer and get their HR or supervisors to sign off on it, turn it to us, and we assess whether it's direct one-to-one experience, like if they're doing another fixed route at Danville Mass Transit or somewhere else, then it's one-to-one experience. If it's something related, they might get, half credit. So 4 years of experience equals 2 years. Was that your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
The good news is, Sharif, in addition to that bus driver that's been working in Bloomington Normal for 5 years, they're going to come in and get that two-step jump, but our wages are also higher than they are in Bloomington. So there's a double advantage to them that we didn't need to give them a 5-year and have a brand new employee coming in at top rate effectively. So there's a double advantage without having to pay them top rate.
I guess my thought would be if it's working well, it might be worth tweaking it a little bit, even for just certain positions. So you say, well, if you talk to the maintenance hiring manager and he says, well, this is maybe a particularly difficult thing to be poaching other employees, should we try tweaking it to 3 years and see how that works for 6 months and see if it gets us any better results, or see if we would, let's say Joe and Mike both walk in off the street and one of them worked in diesel mechanics and one of them is a fresh hire out of college. Do we give the diesel mechanic at least seniority over somebody that's got the same hire date? I think it might be worth analyzing. If it's working well, maybe we should start tweaking it to poach more, because everybody else is poaching our employees. We need to, frankly, fight fire with fire and get the best people we can back.
Thankfully, we haven't had really maintenance employees poached. And I will say that our maintenance wage scale is really only 4 steps. And so when somebody comes in with 2 years of experience, they're already halfway to the top rate. And we do pay a good rate and have good benefits. We've changed the schedule and the shifts a little bit for maintenance too, to make it a little bit more enticing for employees to come. So I agree, we're always tweaking, we're always assessing. So yeah, good suggestions, thanks.
Any other comments or questions?
I just wonder if most of your drivers, are they full-time, or are they most of them part-time, or a mix?
Most of them are full-time, but we do have part-time drivers, yes.
Okay.
Anything else? Again, thank you to the students for coming and for all your work semester long. We appreciate that. The Decennial Committee will review the Decennial report before submittal to Champaign County. So we will now move into our regularly scheduled advisory board meeting.
Move to adjourn the committee.
Okay, is there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, this is the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting, Wednesday, April 24th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Delgado.
Here.
Fasilla.
Present.
Friedman.
It's good
Yes, here.
Nudo.
Here.
Ula.
Here.
And Barnes.
Here.
Quorum is present.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting as distributed?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board? Hearing none, we're going to be moving on to the next agenda item. Is there a motion to approve the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting minutes from March 27th, 2024, the open session?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The clerk has distributed the January 31st, 2024 closed session minutes to the board, and they are being reviewed. Next, we're going to be moving on to communications. Are there any communications from the board? Anything from you, Carl? Okay. Next, we have a presentation by Drew Bargman on MTD's management system, MTD 2071. Drew?
Good afternoon. So this last month, we came to you asking for reapproval of our quality and environmental policy, which is part of MTD 2071. And so this month, I wanted to give you kind of a brief overview of the system at large and kind of the work that we do within that system. This is just informational. We wanted to give you guys a little bit of a foundation of kind of what this program is and what it's working to do inside MTD. So to begin with, there's a couple terms or phrases, I guess, that we wanted to kind of go over just so that we were all kind of speaking a similar vocabulary. ISO, or the International Organization for Standardization, they are a worldwide body of standard agencies that come together. They meet regularly in Geneva, Switzerland, and they publish these standards that companies in different companies will adhere to. Sometimes they're for regulatory reasons, sometimes they are business decisions. And so there are two specific standards that MTD has implemented, and those are ISO 9001, which is a quality management standard, and ISO 14001, which is an environmental management standard. And so then when we talk about the management system, what we're kind of referring to is they're interacting elements that work together. It helps us establish policies, objectives, work through creating processes to achieve kind of the intended outcomes. And then finally, when we say the name MTD 2071, this is internal branding that we have given to the combined system, the 9001 and 14001 system. We believed that giving it a name that's a little bit easier to remember and a little bit more plain English, I suppose, would make it a little bit easier to digest for our employees. And so then when we talk about that internally, it's easier for them to know what we're speaking about here.
Drew, I'm going to interrupt you and explain MTD 2071. The district was formed in 1971, and so our 100-year anniversary will be in 2071, and so we're looking to the future. We use the management systems to plan for how we're going to be successful in 2071, 100 years after our birth.
Thank you, Carl. Next slide, please. And that kind of ties and dovetails into kind of how we got the beginning, how we started with this system. And so in 2014, we were preparing for a pretty large retirement of a good number of senior staff members. I believe we were close to 250 years of combined experience with that group. And so in preparation for that, we started to implement parts of the 14001 and 9001 standard because we really wanted to maintain a lot of that institutional knowledge. We didn't want that to walk out of the door with that group. And so that work was a lot of pulling things out of people's brains and actually getting them down on paper, getting them documented so that when we no longer had that resource to speak with, that we could continue that work. And so that's how things began. Since that point in time, this system really has kind of become a vehicle that helps us move things forward within the organization. It helps us set goals, helps us be prepared for scenarios that are both common, that are emergencies, things of that nature. So it really does help push us forward and helps us continually improve on a day-to-day basis. From a structural perspective, we kind of view the system as a kind of a nesting doll. So at the very top, the largest layer there, the system is driven still by MTD's mission, vision, and core values. And then the tier lower than that, three of our most common goals, we're working towards safety, we're working towards customer service, and we're working towards our environmental performance. And so in the next two layers here, these are the areas that MTD 2071 does help us achieve these things. Right? For those to be successful, we need collaboration across departments. We need consistency within processes as they play out, depending on what that work is. And we're looking for continual improvement on a regular basis, right? We don't want to be the same organization today that we we want to be a better organization 5 years from now than we are today. And so these are the things that are kind of helping us move forward. And the way that those are achieved, and we'll have some examples here in a little bit to show, but by helping us standardize certain processes, things that we want to repeat on a regular basis, that we want to get the same outcomes from. Josh, our maintenance director, is with us here today. We want to have confidence that when his technicians are doing certain work on a vehicle, it's going to be performed the same way each time so that we get consistent results and that it's a high quality product in the end. To go a little bit further into the organization of the system, the leadership of this system does mimic our organizational structure as well, but there are some terms that the standards call out that we have to recognize. And so the first is our top leadership. So this is composed of our managing director and deputy managing director. And Carl and Amy really kind of helped to provide guidance and some direction towards where the system is heading. The management representative, that is a role that I fulfill. I'm helping coordinate a lot of the moving pieces and kind of working with some of the stakeholder groups within the system to make sure that we're still being compliant with the system, that we're moving forward with our objectives. The process owners are our department heads. And so they are working hard to take the things that we're working towards, they implement those within their individual departments and kind of make sure that their staff and their frontline employees are set up to be successful and to help contribute to the larger success of the program. Next slide, please. So then outside of that structure, there are still two groups that exist. The first one is our internal audit team, and they play a really, really critical role within the management system. 3 times a year, we hold internal audits, and so that team selects different areas of the system to kind of do spot checks on, right? They'll come and talk with stakeholders within those groups. They will observe work being done to make sure that the things that we've committed to are happening in that way. I think what's also worth mentioning with this group is that this is a voluntary position. And so the members of that team currently are on the bullets there at the bottom of the slide, but they go through extra training to make sure that they are competent within the standard, the language of the standard, so that they can ensure that MTD is continuing to meet the needs of that standard and keep us in compliance with that. The second group that is the MTD 2071. We call it the MTD 2071 team or the core team. This group gets together weekly to make sure that the system is continuing to move, that we're continuing to make progress on the goals and objectives that we're setting. And so it's a stakeholder group that's really keeping kind of their ear on to the ground to make sure that things are moving and progressing. We do meet throughout the year every Tuesday afternoon. And this group comprises a couple different subsets of that structure. So our process owners are involved in that, so our department heads are involved with that. Our internal auditors are there as well, so that they are aware of kind of the happenings within the system. They can point out things that may be at risk. And then we also have a handful of designated staff that have vested interests in different parts of things, and they can also help us bring some very different perspectives on the work that happens. I can tell you that this group, a lot of the work that they do is we do a lot of document development, document review. We're actually in the process now of kind of taking a look at what our current objectives are within the system. We have a couple that we're very close to finishing, and so we're kind of looking at what the next round of things are so that we can kind of push things further. And so as I mentioned before, the nuts and bolts of the system, a lot of the content within the system is comprised of SOPs, so standard operating procedures. emergency response procedures, and then contractor management. So, anyone that comes to do work on our behalf, whether they're delivering fuel, whether they're delivering certain oils, pumping things from us, we want to make sure that when they're on site, they're doing that job correctly for both the safety of our employees, their employees, and kind of the environmental protection. But these documents that you kind of see here, I'm sure you cannot read them, but like they do comprise a lot of the system. They are the written instructions that a lot of our employees use to kind of fulfill those day-to-day tasks in a consistent way. Then finally, I just kind of wanted to share some of the current objectives that we're working on. A big topic for a couple years now has been service recovery, and so this system, we've been putting the weight of that system behind our efforts towards getting back to full service recovery here, and we're kind of excited because I think we're very, very close with that one. We are still in the process of fully implementing OSHA for MTD. This was something, and Carl, please correct me if I'm wrong, for many, many years, FTA was exempt from OSHA regulation.
That's mostly true. Public transit was exempted from OSHA. It wasn't FTA specifically, but public transit was, and that exemption expired.
And so when we became aware of that we worked that into an objective because we knew that was something that we did need to achieve. We're still in the tail end of implementing an employee management software. This touches our HR functions, this touches our training. There's parts of this that touch our financial payroll process. So similar to some of the suggestions from the presentation before, that wasn't a software that we recognized there was a need, and we've been implementing that over time. In response to the Illinois Local Records Act, we're in the very final stages of implementing a long-term record retention program so that records that are created through day-to-day work are maintained appropriately, held for the proper amount of time, and then at the end of that cycle, we request approval to dispose of those from the state. So that program's almost in place. And then finally, from more of the environmental side, our climate action plan, which really does encompass, and this has been a multi-year plan, this really does encompass a lot of our efforts towards shifting towards alternative fuels, implementing, our solar array in the partnership with the sanitary district. So that's a pretty large, widespread plan, and that's trying to capture a lot of different ways that we can improve that environmental performance. I'm happy to take any questions. We were just wanting to give you a very kind of high-level understanding of kind of the system, what happens within it. There's quite a bit of work that gets put in by staff to make this all run.
I'll just note, if I can, that the previous slide, the objectives that Drew was going over, one of them was the Record Retention Act. Don't worry, it isn't that we have been disposing of things that we shouldn't have been disposing of. The district's history has always been to keep everything. And so we have had literally tons of paper that from 50 years ago, employment records and time cards, we never threw anything away. And so what implementation of the law is actually allowing us to do is shred a whole lot of paper. I don't know if Amy is prepared. I've heard her quote the amount, the tons or the cubic feet or something, the acres. Huh?
Over 27,000.
27,000 pounds of paper that we have shredded. So we have all kinds of storage space that we never had before, so that's a good thing.
Can that be used for bus fuel?
Haven't figured that part out yet.
This is Finance Director Michelle. Just to add, we did get permission from the state before doing any of that, as we're supposed to.
Any questions or comments?
Yes. As a historian of transit, it worries me at getting rid of records. Obviously, you can't keep all records. I would like to assume that you are giving consideration to keeping long-term records of historical interest.
You may assume that. The types of things that we got rid of, like I mentioned, timekeeping for employees that have that passed away 40 years ago. We still had their clocking in and clocking out, and maintenance records for oil changes for vehicles that we retired in 1990. That kind of thing, and so not a historical record, and we did keep historical type documents.
Yeah, but you still have the names of those people and the descriptions of those buses, right?
Sure.
Good, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Drew. Now we move on to the Managing Director's report. Carl?
Okay, I am going to move through this super quick because we have some guests here who have been sitting patiently waiting for us to discuss the airport. So briefly, this is for March, our stats for March. We had 906,789 rides this past March. That's a 6% increase from the prior March, which was 855,518. The year-to-date ridership, we're up 12.5%. So that's looking like we're going to finish the year well. And then the next slide is the a month-to-month comparison for March for the last 6 years, and you can see that as we talk about every month, we continue to recover from our from COVID, I guess, back to our pre-COVID numbers, but that recovery is slowing down because there are fewer and fewer people to capture, and work habits have changed and that kind of thing. But we do still continue to improve. Our monthly operating revenue, we're up 29.7% from March of last year, and the year-to-date operating revenue was up 21.4%. Our expenses were up 8.5% from the previous March, and they are up 12.1% from on a year-to-date basis. And just as a reminder, as we were just talking about, we have more employees than we did a year ago, and we are paying them more, and we're doing that for retention and recruitment purposes. So that makes up the majority of that growth. However, fuel prices are more expensive than they were a year ago also, and so there are a lot of different factors feeding into that. Our year-to-date operating revenue compared to budget was, our revenue is $2.2 million above what we projected, and the operating expenses are $3.4 million below what we had budgeted. And with that, I'm just going to end it there unless there are any questions through page 37 of your report.
What's the significance of these pages we have on the table?
On the table? Oh, you mean of the report that you have on it? Oh, the supplemental. There is an error. It's not in this part of the presentation. There is an error on one of the pages, or a couple of the pages in the packet, and so that's a correction for those that you have in front of you.
And Carl, the last page on the back, the April numbers versus 23, that's through what date of April this year?
Actually, it's March, so that's another error that you'll get a corrected form on. That the April numbers are not complete because we're still.
That's why I wondered what date it was.
As you're pointing out, yes. So that should have been the March report. So we'll email that to you and get that updated on the website.
Thank you.
I'd like to discuss the Northeast Connect area a little bit more, but I'm not going to waste any time, but catch me after the meeting. That's I don't know. I'm a little bit concerned depending on how it's implemented.
Will do.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Carl. Now Ashley McLaughlin will speak on the National Environmental Policy Act. Ashley?
Hello. Yes, I am here to talk about conducting a NEPA assessment for a future development site in downtown Urbana. Some of you might remember that in 2018, MTD worked with the City of Urbana and Champaign County on developing some underutilized space in downtown Urbana. This was to improve mobility, develop a governmental hub, and increase accessibility throughout the area. A lot has happened since then. Of course, COVID, but in addition to that, since then the county has purchased 102 East Main Street and is renovating that so their future space needs are covered. So what we're really talking about today is just the site of the Civic Center, which is where MTD and the county and the city have discussed putting a transfer station. So that is on the map on page 39, that's outlined in blue, would be the general project area or the likely project footprint. And that is the site we're talking about. So when I say a transfer facility or a transfer center, what we're generally proposing at this stage without input from an architect yet is just to construct a new centrally located transit transfer facility up to 3 levels high that will provide opportunities for long-term leases and or public sector condominiumization by local government stakeholders. So essentially a transfer center on the first floor and then additional space up top for additional public entities. Like I mentioned, there's no architect yet. We're not at that stage. At this stage, what we've done is requested permission from FTA to kind of kick off the process with a NEPA assessment. So that's the first step in any federally funded development project. And because we already have a contract with HDR to do NEPA work for the district, and because we have a line item in the budget for architectural and engineering services, we have moved forward with HDR to perform this NEPA assessment for an approximate value of $133,404,000. $133, that doesn't make any sense. $133,404. Thanks. Yeah. That's all local money, and their tentative timeline includes completing all of the NEPA steps involved in the process in October. That does depend on what they find in the meantime, which, you know, could extend the timeline given that these are environmental properties that they're looking at, so they're not sure what they'll uncover. But right now the tentative timeline is October. Are there any questions?
Yes. So it says on the photograph here, or the graph here on page 29 or 39, that it says vacant civic center to be acquired. Where are we on that process?
So we are not allowed to initiate that process or even that conversation until a NEPA analysis has been completed. So we have talked with the city about, you know, the potential to develop the site, but we're not allowed to talk about or initiate the actual acquiring of the property until FTA has determined what the environmental impact would be of developing the site.
We've talked about this before. This is the federal law that gives us guidance on how we acquire property, and we are not allowed to have conversations with a property owner until NEPA is complete. It very specifically and clearly states that we're not allowed to have those conversations. Once NEPA is complete, which is the step that Ashley is updating you on, then we can have an appraisal done on the property. Then we can have excuse me, then we can have a conversation with the property owner on acquiring it and negotiating a price. But it has to go in those steps in that order.
Yeah.
Given that the Sheriff's Office is looking at options, why did we choose not to include that in our analysis area?
Good question. I don't know if you want to speak to that. It has been part of the conversation in the past, but not for MTD purposes.
Yeah, we were at one time looking at doing a larger development that would include as kind of the core or the impetus for the project our transfer facility, but then it would also include executive offices for the county, for RPC, the Regional Planning Commission, the Urbana School District, at one time Cunningham Township, the Sheriff's Department. So we had a broad conversation about it. When the county bought the, I don't know what they're calling it now, but the County Plaza building, the white building there on your map, that they then decided to move the sheriff's office in there. So the sheriff is not looking for space anymore. Their current building, the jail, will be vacated and will be empty. We were never looking at that as, it's not functional for our purpose, for a transit purpose. It will become available for a private developer, perhaps, but that's a county-owned building, and we're essentially not a part of it. And so that larger private development component of our project, for our purposes, has been set aside.
And I guess my only thought with that would be, obviously with the history of the terminal and interactions between pedestrians and other vehicles and buses, they've now signalized Walnut Street there. But I do like the idea of not taking buses through that unsignalized intersection at Vine and Water. And I would reckon that given the proximity to Main Street, there's no way we could get a signal there because their streets are too close. It would be nice if we could get the buses to come off at Vine and Main and enter back into the traffic flow on something like Broadway where it's a little bit less congested. But, wouldn't hurt to add this in, and maybe we don't take all of it, but could take some of it, something like that. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Well, we certainly will look at circulation as a part of this project, and that will be thoroughly analyzed before we make any determinations.
Just to put a historical footnote on it, I'm not sure the exact location, but there used to be a car barn for a little interurban line called the Kankakee in Urbana, which never went near Kankakee. It went from Urbana to Paxton. Ran for about a dozen years, starting in the early teens. And the car barn was somewhere in the vicinity of that dotted line box.
Be careful, that might come up as an archaeological site with this type of study.
Yeah. Ashley, I have mentioned this before, so I just want to bring this up again. It's counterintuitive to be doing due diligence, isn't it? To be doing a due diligence portion after you have a contract, which I don't understand the federal government's position on that. We're spending money on something we may not buy. But I understand it. But again, go back to something that the board voted on, and that is to retain a commercial broker to address the negotiations with the city so that we maximize what we can do. And I know there are governmental policies on how that occurs, but I think we should employ expertise. So there, I said it.
You did, and that is noted, and hopefully in the coming months, soon in the next few months, we'll come to you with some more information on our progress.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're all beating dead horses here, I figure I'll bring up my favorite one, which is, I as I always ask, especially when we're spending local funds, there is an exemption to the FTA's rules when we're hiring architects and engineers. We can't include a local preference. And I guess I'd like to know, I know we say our NEPA work isn't very regular, but we've approved, I believe, 3 of these in the last 2.5 years. So it is a fairly steady stream of business, and there are other agencies locally that are doing NEPA stuff, especially with all this federal money going to renewables. And I was wondering if there was any chance we've looked any more into finding, a local engineering or architectural company that would be interested in cultivating maybe a partnership with one of these out-of-state firms and developing the expertise to do these analyses, because it is a lot of money and it's leaving the district and going to out-of-state or out-of-town contractors.
HDR is an Illinois firm, and I think they're in Peoria. Is that right?
Bloomington.
Or Bloomington. Okay, Bloomington. So they're very close. Excuse me. This is the third NEPA analysis, as you mentioned, that HDR has done for us. So we do have a through line with them. The key thing is knowing the people at the Federal Transit Administration, and HDR does these NEPA analyses nationwide, but in particular in Region 5 of the FTA. They know the staff in the office. They know legal counsel at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. And so, I mean, we can hire people locally and train them all day long, but we're not planning on this is the last NEPA analysis that we have in our, five-year plan, and I don't know what we're trying to accomplish with that at this stage, because we're asking one company, we'll pay you to hire another company so we don't hire you again. That, I think, is difficult to message to them. But number two, we're going to train this local firm that they're not going to be doing the work for 5 or 10 years, and we're going to pay 2 firms to get this work done. And so I recognize your interest, Phil, and I absolutely, we try to keep that in mind, but doing that extra work at the extra cost without a payout didn't seem prudent.
Okay, any other questions?
I would just like to add that HDR is a good company. I have experience working with them. I think it's a good choice. One little correction, I think their nearest office would be in Springfield, not in Bloomington.
Thank you.
I think that they all work from home now, Sharif. So I think Kelly, the person that we work with, lives in Bloomington, so that's her office. So I don't know how that works. I don't know how you technically answer that question anymore. Yes, exactly.
Okay, let's move on to action items. We'll be discussing the Willard Minimum Revenue Guarantee Contribution. So, Carl?
All right, I'm going to invite Tim Bannon, the Executive Director of Willard Airport, up to join me so that we can have a conversation about this. We got a presentation from Tim and Carly McCrory and Jack Pence? Penning, that's it, yes. Sorry, Jack, had a little brain bubble there. And so what we're talking about and what the memo in the board indicates is that staff is asking for approval to commit $20,000 to Willard Airport's minimum revenue guarantee for a leisure travel air carrier. And we would be joining arm in arm with the University of Illinois, the City of Champaign, the City of Urbana, the Village of Savoy, Champaign County, is that right? So many other agencies to try to build up this $1 million minimum revenue guarantee. And so Tim is here to answer any other questions that you've thought of since last month or that you would like additional information on. And I should mention Carly McCrory is here. Also, she's the chair of the Willard Advisory Committee, and then both Christopher Walton with the Village of Savoy, who's on our advisory board, and myself, we're also on that advisory board. So have at it.
So what is the source of this $20,000 which we are going to commit?
So that will come out of our locally generated revenue. So we have transportation and non-transportation generated revenue, and it will come out of that source.
Thank you.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for your presentation last month. It did leave me with a lot to think about leading into today's meeting, particularly around just what observable or accessible climate-related goals that Willard Airport has, beyond maybe what's integrated within the strategic plan, but anything more pronounced, similar to the UIUC's climate action plan or MTD's transition to emission reduction. I did see that the ICAP sort of sphere didn't include Willard within that effort, and I was wondering if you maybe had an idea as to why Willard wasn't sort of integrated within that initiative. I know air travel was mentioned within it, but in the framework of reducing air travel for university staff, and perhaps that's why, but that's not to say that the airport itself infrastructurally or operationally can't also adopt or receive the support and the resources from the university to achieve any kind of climate initiative that they set forth.
Sure. So, the terminal of the airport was built in the 80s, so we are getting to a point where it is reaching the end of its life without investment. So that's something that we're working on through federal grants. We are regulated by NEPA as well, so everything is environmentally cleared. When we do any development, both rehabilitation of existing facilities, but also new development on property, there is a procedure with that. And so when we had the procedure with Ashley there talking about NEPA, we do the same. And that's regulated by the Federal Aviation Administration. The main terminal does have a lot of needs, so we are pursuing a project coming up with bipartisan infrastructure law funds to rehabilitate the terminal, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, windows. The above skylight isn't very energy efficient, lets in a lot of sun, which obviously causes our systems to work a little bit harder, so we want to do something with that skylight. People moving systems, the rotating doors in the front, those are a bit outdated, especially in an airport environment. We need to get to standard vestibules and reduce the amount of entrances to the front of the building. I think we have 9, so we need to reduce that down to a normal amount and have appropriate controls in place to prevent energy leakage from the facility. So we do have things in the works into the future. Also, alternative energy development, that is a part of our strategic plan to look at how we best utilize our land on the airport. We have just short of 2,000 acres. Nearly half of it is farmland today. So of course, a return on investment analysis has to be done on whether we develop land or continue farming it, and that's a thought we have into the future. And we'd have to obviously pursue a power purchase agreement or some other means of financing to be able to make that happen. And investing local funds or cash on hand to develop land for alternative energy development may not have a return on investment that's viable for the airport. So that's something we're looking into. Reduction of energy or reduction of utility costs is important for the long-term sustainability of the airport, and then also those facilities improvements like I talked about. But those are kind of our core elements that we're looking at. The Rome was not built in a day. It takes time. Like I mentioned, this facility was built in the 80s. It has not had a lot of investment into it historically, so we're looking to change that. Like we talked about potentially in our last meeting, we have the security checkpoint project that's coming. That's kind of phase 1 of the terminal work, and we're going to look at phase 2, which is that work I just kind of summarized for us.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I guess maybe just as a caveat, me bringing this up is not sort of in any sort of contingency for voting in favor. It's mainly to ask what type of support you need to achieve these initiatives from the community partners that you're seeking funding from, all of which have their own sustainability initiatives that are framed up very well and that are pronounced, that are accessible to the public. And I see this offering for your market expansion to also sort of be an opportunity to share resources in achieving some of the strategic goals that you have within your plan, but in a more deliberate way from the partners that you're seeking support from.
Further discussion?
Carl, I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject of annexation of the airport property to the MTD.
Well, we have talked about that with the university, and the airport is annexable. It's eligible for annexation. The vast majority of the airport would not provide any property tax revenue to the district. Any revenue would come only from the tenants, the private operating tenants on the property. The conversations with the university have generally gone along the lines of we'd prefer that you don't do that at this stage because that would be a gut punch to the tenants, and it wouldn't provide enough revenue to pay for service because it's far out for us, and it takes that's not an efficient destination for us. And so when we look at recovering our costs, the revenue that would come in from the property tax paying tenants, got it, they would not pay for service. And so if we're not providing service, then those tenants naturally are asking, so why are we being annexed? And so it's been this, until we can pay for service that is in that location, it's been a question that we haven't been able to resolve satisfactorily.
Go ahead, Phil.
So one thought crosses my mind as a compromise if we didn't want to take the airport proper would be, I'm still very focused on trying to get Carl on Curtis into the district. And you know, we have the Walmart store there on South Dunlap, which backs up to the orange and blue golf course. And that takes us to catty corner from Hambleberg's formerly agricultural, but now non-agricultural property that ties into Liberty on the Lakes and up to Carl. Could that possibly be something we could discuss with U of I as a compromise, take orange and blue and be able to go up and serve that clinic and provide regular service to Carl? Something to think about.
It's certainly something that we can have a conversation about. I think we would need legal to be looking at that path as for annexation, but it could be a viable option. That's not something that I have looked closely at. I've heard you mention it before, but I haven't yet looked at it. We will be having some annexation questions for you in the coming months, so we can try to bring that to the table as a question as well. I don't know that the timing will be perfect this year, but if not this year, then next year.
I mean, given the amount of feedback we get on Carl, I'd sure appreciate it if we could maybe poke at it and see if we could get it on that list.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. We certainly have an interest in being there as well, and so does Carl.
Anything further? Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly happy about this effort we're making. I'm in support of it and feel that we've got good people that are on this committee. Carly and Tim are good examples of what they're doing to improve airport opportunities and more destinations at a lower cost. And I think this is a great, great opportunity for us in the transportation business to support what we're doing at the airport. And just to second what Mr. Delgado said about the environmental issues, I mean, we're a leader in what we're doing in our industry, and I think it's an appropriate question to ask about what we see you guys doing. It sounds like you've got some real things that you're approaching that you can handle, and it's in your domain to handle. You can't handle the airlines, but certainly you can do the things on site. One of the things that I have felt very strongly about is that with low-cost air carriers, the reserves or this amount that you're putting into a kitty is as a kitty that needs replenishment. As if once we do get an airline in there, Tim, you know that they're going to make asks of that amount when they don't meet certain standards to meet their profitability standards. And so initially the comment that I read in the paper was that this was going to be a one-time thing and you guys are going to try to build up $1 million. But the reality is, like in Dubuque, they raised $1 million and it's already gone within 1 year. And so it's going to happen. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that there will be bumps in the road. Now, do I think that we have more opportunities with the people who are flying somewhere else out of instead of Champaign, and I don't attribute all the increases in the amount of employments from Springfield, Peoria, and Bloomington to what our losses are. It's not, we know that that's not the case, not directly important, but they're retaining their people more than we are with ours. We have a higher population and lower employments. So if this occurs, I mean, is it in the university's thought process that they would replenish so that we, you know, I would like to see MTD say if a replenishment is needed, we would look at it every year as a part of our budgetary process, that if needed, we would support the airport. And I would like to see, you know, other entities that have made contributions already to you would have that same attitude. What I fear is, you know, you go to a city council who put in $50,000 and they said, well, we drained it all, and they're going, you know, some people are short-sighted on any business that they look at, and they say, well, we did it once, it didn't work, we're not going to do it again. I would rather see this approach be from the university, who's the big hitter in this, say, you know, this is what really happens in today's world, and this is what could happen, and be prepared for it. And that we would be a leader as MTD to say, we acknowledge that, and we know this could happen. So just curious about the university's thought process right now.
I think today, and I'm not speaking on behalf of university administration, I want to make that very clear. I think today this project is our focus. Building on success is a very good strategy. Building money today, having a successful campaign, successfully recruiting and starting and sustaining an airline, I think that'll bring us to that next problem of how do we get the next one going. I don't know if we're there yet. I think this focus on this is a heavy lift as it is, and I think our primary focus should be on getting this project done and being successful and getting that critical low-cost leisure service to our market. That would be my opinion on it from the airport affairs side of things, but again, I don't speak on behalf of the university. You know, the airport will be a representation of what the community wants, both in terms of the initiatives that it supports, like this, and also where people choose to fly. The more people choose to fly at Willard Airport, the more flights we will have, and the more service and connectivity we will have, and the more jobs we will create, and the more local economic impact we will have. Right now, the jobs are being added at Indianapolis and O'Hare and Midway, where the people are driving to fly. I want to be clear again, they are not driving to Bloomington, and they're not driving to Springfield, and they're not driving to Peoria.
Absolutely not.
Very few people. So it's important you know, that as we think about this initiative to invest in our community, that it results, there's an effect on our local economy that can happen. More jobs, more service, and more people using our local airport is a good thing to grow our area and grow our economy, and it grows the benefits of living here and working here and having a family here. So I think there's a lot of different angles to look at this at, and that's my take on it.
I appreciate your sensitivities to, you know, who's saying what, and I just know that you're absolutely right. The number of people, they have higher employments with lower county populations, and that to me just indicates that they're retaining more of their people, which is what we're trying to do. And the more low-cost locations that we provide, I think we'll do the same. And it's just a matter of time where people would try it out the first time. If it works, they'll try it a second time, and we'll get more and more people that way. So your approach is correct. I just hope that the university looks at it from rather than a one-time commitment at this point to a longer-term thought process, because they're representing the entire community. If they own the airport, you know, they have to look at what the entire population wants, and they're obligated to do that. I really believe that, and they need to be a leader in this. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Just one last question. How much effort has been given to seek commitments from the private sector? Not suggesting that we have, you know, one of any particular volume that would elicit them being asked first, but has there been much outreach to private entities?
Yeah, we've held 5 different presentations, different settings with over 30 different private stakeholders, and those amounts are undisclosed that we have committed to this time. I don't think we're ready to release any information yet, but those conversations are still ongoing. Our initial deadline to seek commitments was April 1st. That was put in place so that we could have some ability to assemble the information and prepare it for upcoming airline meetings, which are taking place May 21st and 22nd. We still have the door open for anybody, you know, including the MTD today, and it's obviously past April 1st. So I think that door remains open with all others as well. So it will be an ongoing effort. When we get close to those meetings, we're going to assemble our board packets, if you will, to meet with the airlines as with our 20-minute meetings, and we're going to present that information. But you know, after we get back on the 23rd and someone says, we want to put 50 grand in, we'd say yes, and we'd add that into the list, and we'd notify the airlines, and we'd modify our MRG. So this is an ongoing effort, and I want to be clear on that. Until the contract is signed with an incoming airline, this process remains ongoing.
I would entertain a motion that we approve the Willard minimum revenue guarantee contribution in the amount of $20,000. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on our agenda, the Unit 4 agreement. Carl?
Thank you. This is our annual action on our service agreement with Unit 4 School District. We provide in-district transportation for their middle schools and their 2 high schools. And this is for the 2024-2025 school year. We've been providing service to Unit 4 since 1977, and it's a great quid pro quo type of arrangement that is good for both districts, the school district and the transit district, but also the community as a whole. It saves the school district quite a bit of money, and it trains middle school and high school students on a life skill using public transit, and that's a good life skill to be trained on. So I think it works well for everybody.
Move we approve that agreement.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now the District 116 agreement.
reference my earlier comments with one change, and that is we've been doing service for the Urbana School District since 1987. But outside of that, it's the same arrangement, middle school and high school. They pay us, but they save a lot of money, and we have new riders that are trained.
Do I hear a motion to approve the District 116?
So moved.
Agreement? Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we'll be discussing Resolution 2024-1 low or no emission grant and bus facilities grant. Ashley?
Hello again. So this is the time of year we write grants for FTA. They have competitive grant programs to reduce emissions in the transportation sector, low or no emission grant program, and the bus facilities grant program are two that we are eligible for to apply for hydrogen station expansion. So we'll be applying the same project to both programs. This is a very similar grant that we applied for last year. The only difference being that last year we also asked for some hydrogen buses, but this year we don't have any buses eligible to be replaced. All of our eligible buses are in the process of being replaced through a couple ongoing orders we have. So I will just note that let's see, I did want to point out that the budget listed in item D, where there's a summary of the grant, that has been updated slightly. So since this memo was printed, we have been working with CTE, the Center for Transportation and the Environment. They're a consultant that's been working with us since our hydrogen project started. They were helping us with the grant. They recommended that we increase the cost of the hydrogen station expansion itself, that first line item, by $500,000. But the rest of the details remain the same. It will still be a 11% local match. The expansion itself is still projected to be the same to accommodate about 60 to 70 additional hydrogen buses. And the grant will still include workforce development tools such as training on the station expansion facilities, as well as additional tools for our training simulator, which is relatively new. And I think that is about all I have. So the total cost of the project will be the total ask of the grant is $11 million. I'm going to trip up on this again, probably. $11,086,730 total. The federal request is $9,894,346 with a local match of $1,192,346. So our ask is to approve the resolution. That's something we include in our grant application packet to demonstrate our commitment to the local match.
Are there any questions for Ashley? Do I hear a motion for us to approve the resolution 2024-1 low or no emission grant and bus facilities grant?
I would move that we approve it as modified by Mrs. McLaughlin.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second?
Second.
All those, I think we need a roll call on this particular item. So will the clerk please call the roll? Brittany?
Delgado,
Yes.
Vasella,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Nudo,
Yes.
Barnes.
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, next we'll discuss the zero emission transition plan.
Me still. This is a requirement of these grant programs that we apply for, these FTA programs for low and no emissions and bus facilities. So we have, our first plan was done in 2022. We updated it last year, and we're updating it again this year. So it's a little bit of a living document in that sense, just revisiting the plan and updating our chart that takes us from, our current fleet of buses to a fully zero emission fleet of buses by 2040. So I will just point out a couple of the changes from last year. So first, let's see. Since we have added, we're currently commissioning our 10 new hydrogen fuel cell buses. That update is reflected at the bottom of page 1 or page 52 in your packet. And then that also impacts figure 1, our bus fleet composition. So that timeline has changed slightly, but we still have the same kind of goal deadline of being fully zero emission by 2038. That also assumes that we are able to expand our hydrogen fuel station in 2026 if we get the grant this year. That will allow us a few years of implementing the station and then buying new hydrogen buses or additional hydrogen buses in 2029. Other updates include page 3 of the report, or page 54, talks about paratransit vans. We were awarded 2 battery electric vans through an IDOT grant through the same low and no emission program. We don't know exactly when we will receive those, but those are reflected in figure 2, the van fleet composition figure that shows we anticipate getting those 2 buses hopefully by the end of this year, and then continuing to expand that fleet further, having a fully zero emission van fleet by 2035. And then the additional figures 3 and 4 project essentially the investments that will need to be made to support this transition. Those are based on 2024 dollars. We haven't included any projected inflation. Those are just in current dollars, to give a sense of how to budget for the future. And then lastly, and the other updates are pretty minor. No updates have been made to funding sources. Those stay pretty consistent for us. The policy assessment on page 8 also remain the same. And then on the last section, workforce analysis, we made some updates to reflect a new apprenticeship program that MTD has initiated in 2023, and the details of the workforce development funding that we are including in this year's grant application. So the additional tools for our training simulator and training for our station expansion. But those reflect essentially all the updates to the transition plan. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are the yellow highlighted text, is that the changes?
Those are the changes, yes.
Ashley, I just wanted to say this is really well put together, and I would like to ask, please, anybody reporting on this, anybody watching at home, it's a 10-page report, and she can't go over it all here, but I know I'm going to hear a lot about this. And it's really important, we talk about we spent $10 million this year on hydrogen fuel cell buses. That was mostly through, I believe, an FTA grant. That was our low-no. Right. So we're not talking about spending $10 million of new technology on something we've only been trying for a year. We were able to fund hydrogen almost completely with grant money, and we're piloting it out. And then if you look at our transition timeline, we're really looking at making our next major investment in that in 5 years. So we're going to get 5 years to play with hydrogen. And if it's been going well, but if something goes really badly with it, or if the economy changes, we can pivot without committing additional local funds. And it's the same thing with the battery electrics. Right now we don't feel like battery electric is ideal for our needs, but we've got 2 vans that I believe you just said are free that we can play with until 2031 before we have to commit to buying more fully electric vehicles. So, we are being very progressive with exploring alternative fuel sources, which we absolutely have to be. But at the same time, I feel like we're being really good stewards of local funds, and you guys are really digging deep and finding people that are willing to essentially pay us to try the new technology, which is really fantastic. So this isn't, like I said, I know I'm going to hear a lot about this, but I would really encourage you to read the 10-page report. I think it's a really conservative approach that's getting us a lot of inexpensive experience so that we're ready for really the changes that are coming, whether we like it or not.
And it's available to read on our website.
Thank you, Carl.
Do I hear a motion to approve the zero emission transition plan?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we will review Resolution 2024-2 Downstate Operating Assistance Program, otherwise known as DOAP, that grant. Discussion on this.
I'll just briefly say this again is our annual resolution for us to submit our operating grant application, and it's just one of the requirements that have to go along with the application.
Any discussion or questions?
Move approval.
Okay,
Second.
I hear a motion, a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, oh, this is another roll call. Excuse me, I almost missed that one. Brittany, if you would call the roll, please.
Delgado.
Yes.
Fasella.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Nudo.
Yes.
Burns.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next regular Board of Trustees meeting will immediately follow. That's not right. Are we having a decennial meeting once again?
I think there's a good chance that we will, because we're hopeful that the actual report is complete, and so the students won't be here to give a presentation, but I think that we'll just meet as a committee and discuss the actual report and then approve it to submit to the county board.
Okay, so that'll be Wednesday, May 29th, 2024 at 3 p.m. right here at the Illinois Terminal. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, meeting is adjourned then. Thank you very much for all of your time and attention.